Make this bigger. Chapter 1.30. A ghost lit every candle. Billy Purgatory sat alone in the witch house on his birthday. As many times as he'd explored the woods those long ago summers, chasing Lysandra while not really admitting to himself that he was chasing her, he had never found this place of yore. It was a local legend. People said if anyone ever found her home, the Witch of Wishes would grant their desire along with a curse, both unavoidable. The house itself had long time been grand, but years of disrepair and loneliness had caused it to sink and shrink in the woods about it grew closer, and the second floor collapsed onto the first. Only the roofless parlor was still able to be explored, and that was exactly where he had entered. Billy leaned against the fireplace and watched the sky. Tonight, he had only a slight moon and a meteor shower casting down on him. His feet were propped up on his skateboard. Historically, Billy retreated from the darkness when his birthday came around in October, just before Halloween. Billy never felt alive this time of year. The real world around always felt less like wakefulness and more like a nightmare on a loop. He could definitely perceive a thinning of the membrane between worlds during this cryptic season. He'd never possessed the right words to describe the feeling. How does one describe a haunting they're not fully aware they've been slow thrust into? By the time you perceive you're alone on that blinding stage again, the show is already over. That night, William Purgatory was just another spirit wandering through the shafts of neon light, the meteors left in their wake before exploding high above his head, and the thought balloons cast haphazardly above this spectacle. Billy had never been one for birthdays. Pop had told Billy he received a skateboard the day he was born, and it was the best thing he'd ever gotten. So what better present could there ever be to look forward to? Pop had given him lots of gifts growing up, knives, firecrackers, and air rifles, but he never gave Billy any of those presents anywhere near his birthday. No matter what he got or how big a boom it made, nothing ever dethroned the trusty old board. Pop had admitted that Jolly Elves hadn't been responsible for dropping it into Billy's tiny hands, but would say nothing else regarding the matter. Billy knew the truth from watching the 8mm movie. Mutter Kelroy had made it for him. The only reason Billy had returned to the woods at all was to find Lysandra, who had never given him a straight answer as to whether or not she had gypsy fortune teller powers. When he'd push her too much when they were kids, she'd tell Billy that gypsy was an offensive word, he shouldn't use it, and that she was living in the woods to worship the old goddesses. Billy knew what he'd seen, though. Spiritualism, medium, magicus stuff. Lysandra's grandmother had been the card-shuffling fortune teller type with the fancy neon sign in the window, who had told him things from beyond her grave. The old lady had been right, and she'd looked just like a gypsy from a storybook, so Lysandra's attempts to avoid the issue had never held much weight. Until Billy learned that the old storybook stuff was filled with descriptions of things called stereotypes, and Billy hadn't liked being stereotyped back in the day, and realized Lysandra had been right all along and that he wasn't going to do that to other people anymore. Except for vampires and yetis and them kind of people. Billy knew what they were all about, and they were all the same because they were monsters or ghosts or something weird. As a shaft of fire rock lit up the sky, Billy wondered if this was why Lysandra had spent so much time in the woods. Had she been looking for the witch house too? Billy figured fortune tellers and witches had to be related in some way or another. That made more sense than looking for granny goddesses. He knew someday soon he would find Lysandra. Maybe it wouldn't be that particular night, but the season of Halloween had already begun, and she wouldn't be able to hide from the stars for too much longer. At first, Billy hadn't been sure that Lysandra was still anywhere close. That was until he heard that Mr. Brickstaff's mansion up on the hill had burned up. Nothing but sooty brick and rusty steel remained behind. It was at the base of that palace in the servant's cottage that Lysandra had lived with her aunt so long ago. Billy was pretty sure that he knew who had started that fire, and if it hadn't been Lysandra, she sure as hell hadn't tried to put it out. Billy wondered aloud into the night air why all the girls he was into were pyromaniacs. Anastasia had never owned up to burning out the hive that housed the last of her race, the vampires in the abandoned factories by the sea. Billy knew it had blazed up, though. He'd put two and two together, and it had equaled Anastasia. Maybe Lysandra had heard that story and started her own fire to one-up the other girl. It was no secret that Billy was always pretty impressed by a good fire. Two dueling metaphysical arsonists vying for his attention. Could Billy's life ever truly be that awesome? Aside from that, Lysandra wasn't into him. She tolerated him, but it wasn't anything beyond that. It never really had been, never really would be. There was some innocent infatuation and some kissy face, but Anastasia ruined all that. Well, he had kind of ruined it pretty good on his own too. Anastasia just helped things crash and burn way faster. Billy did respect that Lysandra had at least owned up to the fact that he got on her last nerve. She was honest. That was fair, Billy told himself. I know that crafty vampire started that fire. String of black cats popping out lots of noise, but none of it true. Anastasia always had a smug air of false sweetness about her, a cloud of wishing well lies, stale and stagnant, never changing, always drawing Billy in with those sad yet mischievous green eyes when he was at his weakest. Before he knew it, she was wrapping arms around him, whispering in his ear, fangs slipping into place. Then he'd crack Anastasia in the nose with an elbow and have to peel her off him like the snake she really was. Just like that old-timey broad from that garden with that applesauce tempting people who are just trying to build a big-ass boat and save all the animals because it won't stop raining, and not all animals can swim. 3 meteors were burning in the sky when Billy finally stood to say, "All right, witch, here's my wish. Since you didn't like my fire or my lucky cat when I was a kid, I figure you owe me." While Billy saw no witch to formally address, he knew the night rabble was in the woods and watching him. "My wish is this. Don't let Anastasia find me before Lysandra does." The wind got a chuckle at his words. It threatened to snow again like it had long ago, the night the vampires almost took his life in those same woods, and Lysandra had saved him. There wasn't a cloud in the sky, though, just burning random cosmos rocks. "'Cause you know," he continued, more to himself than to anything in the woods, "I could be tempted either way right now. Billy wished that he was celebrating his birthday in the sunshine, but Billy never got to see the sunlight anymore. He knew he was going to have to start doing all his work at night when they were awake. Things that drained blood and tore flesh and celebrated murder. Things that slithered and prayed to the cold. Those were his birthday party gifts. Lurking was their style. They'd forgotten what the sunshine's slow burn was like, and they had no interest in remembering. Billy hadn't walked in anything brighter than an overcast day since Lucinda Drew had been taken from him at the Chelsea Hotel. Why did you take her from me? He couldn't even call forth tears. He questioned the empty air for understanding, for some clue toward an answer. Billy stood on the remains of the stone wall of the parlor. He turned his heart toward the line of dark trees and fully accepted what it all meant, fearing the night. We were going to leave. We were going our own way. You'd never heard from either of us ever again. I was ready. I'd made up my mind to let it all go. I thought that's what you wanted from me. Stay stupid. Don't be a hero. Forget about the past. Don't go looking for her. Don't try to find her. Nothing spilled from the darkness in true reply. I was going to get lost, find a regular job in another place far away from here. Lucinda was going to be enough for me. Even deeper nothing. Lucinda didn't have anything to do with any of this. She was innocent. What could she have ever done? What could she do to you, to any of you? What could she have done to that time zombie that took her? I know you're all in it together. What did she or I ever do to any of you bastards? This fire rock cut the sky. You stole my mother from me. You sent a psychotic murderer disguised as a pretty girl to ruin my life. Now you've driven my pop insane. And when I've had enough and raced to get away from it all, of course, there was no answer from dark trees. Billy let himself slip from the wall and slide down it. He wrapped his arms across his chest and couldn't forget the look of surprised horror Lucinda wore as the time zombie stepped out of nowhere and snatched her away. Billy was sure that he would never forget that look, that desperate plea for understanding before her mind was torn from reality and her body torn from her and cast into nothing. I'm sorry, Lucinda. Everybody was right about me. I wasn't a hero. The trees seemed to nod in agreement, finally waking, spurred on by the wind picking up. Billy focused on them and then could see past their dark needles and swaying limbs. He could see all the horrid things that lived in the night. They crept up behind the trees and he could hear their fangs scrape against each other in their mouths. Their knuckles cracked and hooves scratched the bark. Tails pounded against the ground. They, the night things, could smell the blood in the air that clung to Billy's words. Billy was standing beyond the parlor wall. He began to walk defiantly toward their death grove. He would walk into the place just beyond the lie we hold so dear, locked in our hearts. The lie of what is real and of the evil that can only be make-believe. He pulled Amelia's sword scabbard from his back and pointed it at the thick night as he moved, spun his fingers first and then sliced it through the air. I'm not afraid of you anymore. You've made me tough as nails, just like you are, but I'm not one of you. The nighttime is my time, but I won't run with you or from you. Now you run from me. Billy felt the world shift beneath his feet as he stepped into the borderland between worlds and where they hid. I'm going to hunt you now. I'm going to kill every last one of you. Billy cut into the brambles with the scabbard and felt wretched things flee further into the dark at his advance. I might not be a hero, but I'm dangerous and pissed off. Billy ran into their grove, leaping to the top of an old tree stump and moving like his mother would. It taught him how to move had they not taken her away from him. He found the grove empty, but he could still smell the cowards. He could almost see them jumping into their chasms at the borderland of the witch house. Billy stood with arms outstretched, the useful half of a sword in his right hand and his skateboard shield to his left, his chest open to their slings and arrows, daring them to bring it. All that remained of the grove that had long ago been the witch's orchard were words marked into the dirt by the night's claw and tail, an evil promise warning. Billy.Purgatory, you fight alone. Billy stared at the words and knew what he had to do. He would find his mother. He would save her from them. He would worry no more about the threats of the night. He finally had a righteous mission. Because honestly, how much more cursed could he possibly get? Somebody made a song in one of my old books. I had no idea. I found it on YouTube randomly, which was weird. The phone ringing on a Saturday was not a normal occurrence at the Purgatory household. At times, he wasn't even sure if they had a phone. It rang so infrequently. I'm not even sure what that is, Pop, Billy had answered. Before you know it, those mobile phones are going to be controlling everything people do. Some guy in a bunker somewhere is going to have his hand on the joystick. He's going to make people bump into each other just for kicks, banging into one another, then falling on the concrete, trying to crack it when their dumb asses touch down. No idea where they even are, or why they were walking down the street, or who they were really talking to into that little plastic box they got stapled to the side of their head. That sounds kind of funny, Pop. Pop cracked open a beer and shoved a marshmallow on the end of his survival knife. You know what ain't funny about that scenario, Billy boy? Billy shook his head. Once the stars and Tweety birds stopped spinning around all over their heads and they halfway got their wits back about them, they're just going to sit there dumbfounded and not be able to even fart out an excuse me. Pop was chewing a cigar and holding the burning marshmallow over the fire. They won't even remember how to do nothing if it don't involve squawking into that old phone box. Can I have a cigar? Language brought us together, boy. He watched the fire burn the melted sludge on the end of the knife. Prometheus went through a lot of trouble for nothing. People can always find a way to build a fire or do anything that causes mass destruction. We would have figured that one out for ourselves on our own. What about a beer? Can I have a beer? That tongue you got jammed in your mouth and them teeth you got circling it are all that really matters in the world. You learn how to use words right and you are the fire. Whole ocean full of pissing fire hoses can't never ever put that blaze out. Can I stop sharpening all those knives then? We're going to give them back what we fought so hard to get. We ain't even going to realize we're doing it. There'll come a time when men won't be able to sit across a fire like you and I are doing and just talk it out. We won't remember what it's like to be in the same physical space with another human being. Tongue won't work unless it's jammed up some electrode's ass. Did you take your blood pressure pills? Pop blew out the marshmallow sacrifice on the end of his knife. Fuck Prometheus and his long distance plan. Pulling out of the memory kind of made sense to Billy finally. And he definitely was hungry for baby back ribs. He'd been out skating and paint graffiti the night before. There now existed in this world yet another tanker rail car with a giant winged rhino on it. And it was well into Saturday afternoon of the day after. The phone had rung 20 times before Billy found it under a stack of newspapers. Pop must have been out running his errands or throwing dice behind the liquor store. The line between the two sort of blurred. Billy put the phone to his ear. He never said hello. If it was important, they'd start talking. And when he got bored with them, he'd let the phone slip from his hand and crash to the floor. He always fell into a sword pose from the cover of a Viking comic book when he dropped the phone. The voice on the other end started talking. She knows, Billy.Purgatory. Billy didn't recognize the voice or the accent. He was pretty sure it was English because he was able to answer back. What does she know? Not on the phone. There was a pause. Billy thought he heard the beeping of a cash register. Meet me in the alleyway behind State Street. The alleyway behind the Chinese restaurant? The voice cleared its throat. I'm not at liberty or inclined to wonder what is on the other side of the alley. Oh, I promise you, it's the alley behind the Chinese restaurant. I've been jumping that dumpster on my skateboard since I was 7. That is unimportant. It's totally the Orange Dragon Chicken Restaurant. I don't think that is correct. Can you hold, please? You're putting me on hold? Please, if it's not too much trouble. Yeah, I'll hold. Click. The voice came back even after the click noise. Orange Dragon Chicken Restaurant. Billy was reaching across the coffee table for his skateboard. It's still me, dude. Oh, I beg your pardon. Please hold again. Tell you what, how about I just meet you in the alley behind the Orange Dragon Chicken Restaurant? That's not where I am. Okay. Billy shook his head and wondered if he had a t-shirt that didn't smell like silver spray paint. I'll hold. Click. Orange Dragon Chicken Restaurant. Billy dropped the phone and went into a Viking sword pose. The phone was still squawking at his feet. He moved across the carpet of the living room and towards the washing machine. Hello? Orange Dragon Chicken Restaurant. Hello? You're as cold as ice. La da da. Da da da. Yada da 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 da. Ma ba ba da 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 da. I gotta rework all that. Boop, boop, da, 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 da. Mm-hmm. He stared up and into the branches that blocked the night sky. The needles of the pine were steeped in the same twisted light that colored the outline of the sentry deer. The moon had turned red and cast a light as if filtered through the blood of angels. Not only was Billy's world all wrong, everyone else's world was in straits equally dire. Is this the end of time? This is what a normal 12-year-old boy would have been webbing over his frightened mind. Billy was not a normal boy. He stepped in the red spotlight of the moon and let it rain into his skin. This is how it's going to be, and if you ain't in the mood to listen to me talk sense. He stared down the rack of the alpha buck lording over him upon the wooded hill. Then bring it. Nothing was offered, though. The deer pulled back into shadow and vanished as with the last tendril of smoke from a forgotten fire. Billy knew that they would be waiting if he climbed the hill, and they would do anything necessary to keep him from her. He'd seen their work on the first night he had truly spoken to Lysandra. It was the night in the snow where they first kissed. The deer had seen the vampires as threat to Lysandra because her spirit was tied to theirs. She appreciated their world, the forest, and they lived together and protected one another. The deer had charged the vampires, ramming and mauling them until enough stolen blood was spilled from their bodies to cause them to be no more. They had done this to protect her and not Billy. What would a pack of deer care if Billy lived or died? He was as much an outsider to their world as the vampires were, maybe even more of an outsider. But there was no place in this world where Billy wasn't an outsider. Only on the streets was he alive and at home, but that involved constant motion, and he rolled over concrete and sailed the air above it. Normal people's houses, where they felt safe in the night, surrounded by those they loved, were little more than a blur as Billy flew past. Opening the door and inviting Billy in to share food and hearth would have been unthinkable an idea as letting a vampire step from your doormat and into your foyer. When Billy stepped from the trees and found the abandoned blacktop that he had never known existed, it felt right. He dropped his skateboard, and it barely had a chance at a joyful shriek when the wheels touched asphalt. He was already on and moving forward, and he was pushing faster. He closed his eyes and let the road take him where he would. When he opened them again, he saw the rusting girders of the supports high over the bridge. It crossed the chasm cut from the inlets running to the ocean. It was ancient, but isn't everything when you're 12? It was only half a bridge. The further expanse that at one time had joined the other bank was long gone. This was an artifact of forgotten days, a remnant of long-ceased Sunday drives. It was a portal to uncharted lands that no longer existed. The moon was shrinking, yet still cast a vibrant sheen over the useless iron that refused to fall into the canyon and let the river runoff flow through. And she was standing there and watching him roll toward her. Anastasia was in a variation of schoolgirl's uniform. She wore saddle shoes and tights and alternating bands of black and white like a morose clown guarding the folds of a sideshow tent. She was framed in a pleated skirt and a long-sleeve sweater and button high, only letting the lace collar of her blouse peek out. It gave her a regal quality that remained playful. She wasn't the queen. She was the queen's castaway daughter, who would overstep the rules of proper society one day and end up living out her days in a forgotten tower, tempting pretty birds lighting on the barred windowsill of her prison to come land on her fingertip, and then swallowing them whole. The moon was eclipsed to black, save the out damn spot of blood in its center. Anastasia looked perfectly normal, bathed in the torrent of red that gave the night world its only light. And Billy stayed balanced on his board when the wheels finally stopped. You're the last thing I wanted to find at the end of this road. Billy's neck still stung from when she'd bitten him in the woods, but he knew that he wouldn't be digging himself out of a grave in the near future. Anastasia had bitten him before, and it hadn't worked then. All the wound would do is throb with every beat of his heart and remind him that she wasn't a she. She was an it, a she-it, but still the it part was a thing. Billy was done playing nice with its. I don't want to see you either. So do something fancy you think will impress me that involves turning back that way you came and skating off into the woods. Anastasia hated the woods and always pronounced the word with optimal disdain. I came here to watch the moon in peace, and I wasn't aware this was one of your haunts. I don't haunt anywhere, sister bitchin'. I ain't a vampire out biting people who don't want to be bit on the neck and making nice girls cry because they think what? The silver of her eyes was speckled in the red light above. That normal red-blooded, no, blood is a bad place to go with this. America's citizens, that flag waving dudes that have stolen social security numbers and don't necessarily go to church, but have jumped headstones in the graveyard attached to a church. She stared at his moving lips as if she was unsure whether she wanted them to stop moving or to never stop. Look, he continued to vehemently ramble, you're a vampire and I know my rights and I like potato salad. What rights are we speaking of specifically? She tilted her head to the left and the sway of raven hair floated with that motion. My pop fought in Vietnam and played baseball. He didn't do any of that sacrificial stuff so hustling vampire chicks like you could boozle his only kid with your vampire hair and that fast-talking rattlesnake you call a mouth. Anastasia crossed her arms. What did I do exactly that has so offended your obviously misappropriated sense of patriotism and the general concept of American sovereignty? That. Billy's hands flew toward her, and he pointed with all his fingers because the point he was about to make demanded lots of fingers. What you just did right there, I'm trying to explain to you that I'm staring into your bag of tricks, and there ain't anything in that bag that's going to trick me again. If me and my pop both didn't have warrants, I'd have a SWAT team and that lawyer that has his face on the sides of those buses after your ass for fang harassment, which I'm pretty sure is illegal in every state except probably Texas and Florida. Anastasia stood quietly as her rights were read to her and then turned to stare up at the nearly eclipsed moon with a festering red eye. If that's how you feel, then I won't ever bother you again. She gave him a wave of her hand without so much as a second glance. Goodbye now. Well, Billy didn't know what to say, but well sounded like a great start. Trouble was nothing else came out of his mouth. I thought you were leaving to go secure the services of an attorney. She kept her arms crossed and stayed focused on the strangeness high above the broken bridge. Billy pushed his board up and took hold of it so he could roll away. Now that this was all sorted out, and he told her what for. I am leaving. He looked up at the moon, but found his gaze drifting down and following the line of her hair as it made a trail down her back. My pop fought in the war. That's all I'm saying. Please thank him for his service. I'm really rolling out of here now. Okay. I'll just stay here staring up at the moon and not offending anyone with the ugliness of my creepy rattlesnake mouth. Thanks for pointing that out to me, by the way. My hair also says you're welcome for letting it know it's so offensive to the human condition. Her hair swung as she spoke. I'll be sure to scissor it all off at my earliest opportunity. Hopefully I won't horrify any defenseless children and put them into therapy in the short time it's exposed, as I determine whether or not the moon being in unscheduled eclipse is cause for concern. Billy walked up to stand beside Anastasia, his arms wrapped around the skateboard pressed to his chest. I never said anything about hair conditioner. It's all right. She continued to look up. You don't find me attractive. I suppose my look isn't for everyone. We're only in our early teens. Perhaps I'll continue to blossom. Hopefully one day I'll be able to say with confidence that I was an awkward young vampire girl with bad hair in the mouth of a serpent. But now I look adequate, like every supermodel biography ever written. Billy was quiet. I didn't mean to get all personal. No, it's good that you said what you said. I'm truly grateful, Anastasia explained. I think it's healthy to have a realistic outside opinion of your appearance. He looked up. Why is the moon like that? Are we all going to die? Let's hope not. It would be a real shame to not only die, but to look hideous while doing so. Hideous is bad, huh? Billy asked, feeling regret that he had said all that mean stuff to her, even if she maybe had it coming. It means very ugly. So yes, bad. I didn't call you hideous. I don't even know that. I didn't even know that word until just now. Your limited vocabulary makes all the difference in my self-worth. I would throw out a few more ugly themed words you don't know, and I might just start to regard myself as a toad slowly becoming a fairy princess. Back to whether or not the moon is going to kill us? I don't think so. She studied it. And Billy watched the rings of her pupils flash more silver and begin to glow. It was freaky and captivating, but other words he didn't know the proper definition of. Why do your eyes turn silver? I don't know why they go silver. They turn many colors depending on different circumstances. I just know it helps me see in the dark. Lysandra hates me now. She doesn't hate you. Anastasia turned those silver eyes towards Billy. She doesn't know how to truly hate. She's feeling at least as self-conscious as I am right now. She thinks that you chose me over her. I didn't know. Yeah, Fairy Princess is going to be an unattainable level of enchantment for me to reach the longer I talk to you. I ain't saying you're ugly. Billy looked away, and the flowing water that cut the canyon resembled a river of blood. I just don't understand. What don't you understand? Why you care? Billy didn't care about the water or the bridge or the moon anymore. Lysandra likes me because I do nice things for her. I ain't never done anything nice for you. That's not why she likes you, Anastasia assured him. You really don't understand girls at all, do you? When Billy made himself look at her again, Anastasia was gone. Hey! Billy looked around, and the red cancer that had latched the center of the moon vanished and the world went fully dark. We ain't done yet. Yes, we are. The voice seemed to echo from everywhere. No, we're not. Billy spun around, board in hand. He could still hear the crushing of the waterfall below. But his world had begun to blur again. Why do you care? You don't have to do nice things for me. I don't even want you to. The thought makes me physically ill. Then why don't you leave me alone? He was so confused. Because you belong to me. Billy stopped spinning. He heard the water at his back, and the last echo of her voice faded. He knew he was facing the road again, and that it would lead him from this place. And he knew that Anastasia was gone.